An interesting backstory.
I think it's important that everybody knows about the Wizard of Oz.
A professional with decades of experience in her field.
I'm a psychotherapist who works pretty much exclusively with law enforcement officers, as well as other first responders.
Strong opinions and a definite point of view.
What people see on the streets, this job, is not normal.
Brutally honest and funny.
When I get a call in the middle of the night and they've been drinking beer, they're normally crying over a relationship. When they're drinking Jack, they get on the phone and they start off with, "Hey, babe."
She identifies problems, probes, pokes, and makes you think.
So if something happens to your family, which is truly your biggest fear, and you haven't thought about every single potential of what could go wrong, then you feel like you failed.
She has her own special style.
You're either part of the problem or part of the solution. Pick a side.
Welcome to StephTherapy911 with Stephanie Samuels.
Welcome to StephTherapy911 with Stephanie Samuels. I'm a psychotherapist that works pretty much exclusively with law enforcement, but today I have, I'd say the queen, but I'm going to go for the empress of women who work with law enforcement. And if I could be anything when I grow up, it's going to be Dr. Beverly Anderson. So Dr. Anderson works with the Metropolitan Police Department. She runs their EAP, but sometimes I think those initials EAP come with a stigma attached, which goes with it's not going to be trusted, that they go back to the department. This is an EAP that has a 25 to 27% utilization rate, which is truly unheard of in law enforcement. It's unheard of any place. So we need to be able to discuss how that happens. What makes this work? So Dr. Anderson, I'm going to be calling Beverly.
Please call me Beverly.
So I want to start off before I get to Beverly. So I have been following Beverly for years. So here is trauma response. Dr. Beverly Anderson, the summer of 1998. 98. Pretty amazing. First of all, the bitch don't age. We'll just start there. Unbelievable. But what's even more fascinating than that, because she's just amazing, is that the same stuff that was talked about in 1998, we are still addressing today. Frustrating as hell. So we know that we've got a pretty good formula of what works. Clearly, you have figured out what has worked, and yet you have been on show after show after show. You have been to testify in almost every arena there is to testify. You have understood law enforcement like nobody else. You have come down close to being incarcerated, protecting those that protect us. Like, you got it. And yet the frustration of really running in place like a goddamn hamster on a habit trail for 32 years. And yet you take amazing care of Metropolitan as well as others. But understanding what it takes to work with this population. So one of the things that I train on is Beverly's ever so important, brilliant piece of work that truly has been able to capture the mood of a cop, because she has managed to figure out how those facial expressions, happy, depressed, angry, pensive, how you have been able to figure out exactly what that looks like. So I want to show everybody exactly what Beverly has done to make sure that we all know so well how to predict how an officer is feeling. I just did a suicide presentation actually for Secret Service, and I well, it was for suicide prevention, and they were also excited that I finally had something where I could actually tell the difference in the mood. And when I held that up, you could just see their faces. And I said, "Yep," I'm like, Dr. Anderson figured this out decades ago. So you know, that's it's brilliant. But your greatest lesson that you have taught me was about not only humility, but about giving everything you have. So over the years, you and I know I reached out for you, and you and I will never be able to figure out when that was. But to me, it was like calling a movie star, and you availed yourself to me, which I couldn't imagine that you would ever speak to somebody like me. And I stayed in touch, and you always welcomed me when I was in DC to come in, talk to you, what have you. So speed ahead to April of 2014, where Boston bombing. And I had gotten in touch with you. I was now hired by the Boston Police Department to be their clinical director of their peer support, and who had the most successful kind of unit was you. So called you up, actually emailed, sent you a pretty lengthy email, and kind of laid everything out. And in true Beverly Anderson form, here's the last paragraph of that. So I am done. So this was May 3rd of 2014. My ending was, I am hoping with all this laid out, you are still willing to open your doors to us. I am honored and blessed to be able to gain insight from you. I am still planning on meeting you at 10 a.m. Everyone lands at Reagan Airport at 9 a.m. I want to verify that you're expecting us at 10 a.m. and that we will be attending your supervision session at noon as well. I see where I'm supposed to enter, but don't have the address, as none of your emails have it in by your signature. Please let me know if there are any changes. If not, I'm looking forward to spending Tuesday, the 13th, with you and your staff as well. So I will tell you, the email came back very quickly, and Beverly housed myself, two colleagues, one of them who is heading up from McLean, Beth, their head psychiatrist, and Brian, who is heading up the peer support unit for Boston at the time. So not only did we come there, but you had two of your psychologists on staff, Anastasia, who I'm now very close with, Stacy, as you know, she came to Jersey. But not only did you open up your doors, but this is what you had taught me. So when we were going over, you know, kind of how your unit works or what have you, and our unit was struggling with a lot of documentation, just different things on how it works. So number one, you did what every good cop shrink does. You made sure that everybody had a really good lunch. So you catered lunch for us, which was all waiting by the time that, you know, that noon had come around. And then I remember saying to you, thinking like I was going to do some backdoor. It feels like my cousin Vinny when he's trying to, you know, manipulate him to get documents, you know. And Marissa Tomei is like, "Don't you understand? They have to give that to you." So I remember like thinking, all right, if I'm really nice to her or whatever else, you know, maybe she'll share her documents. I remember saying, you know, Beverly, do you mind if you know, we kind of look at what you have? You're like, look at what we have. I'm going to give you everything that we have. And I don't know who was working for you at the time. You're like, start photocopying, get everything that's in every binder, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And here it was. And it reminded me of a saying that Irma Bombach had. basically, when she goes before God, she wants to be able to say to God, I used everything that you gave me. I've left nothing here. And that's what it did for me. It made me realize the insecure part of me wanted to hoard everything, to kind of be the one. And then I realized truly through the woman that I admire the most, who has made the greatest impact single-handedly in therapy, that I needed to learn. I needed to give everything that I had, just like you had done with me. That if I left here with one gift, if I hadn't been able to educate every and any therapist that could potentially become culturally competent, then I had done the greatest disservice here on earth to the population that I have given my life for. So that is you. That is the role that you've played, not only in my life, but in what now is thousands of people that I have educated through the academies, been able to lecture in front of, that you come with me every time. And I know that there are countless Stephanies out there that you have helped, that now get to go out and be truly culturally competent because there was a Beverly Anderson in their lives. So having you on the show today for me is like somebody having a movie star that they've always admired on. So thank you. So I want to be able to I want to know how you ended up being able to truly understand cops, because you've never been one.
No, married to one.
Which makes this even more difficult. And amazing that you do it. And how you ended up picking them, or did they pick you, and your vigilance in taking care of them. I mean, truly, I mean, to the effect, like we had talked about, I mean, that you went up before a judge and refused to hand records, citing a case, but being willing to be incarcerated for that case. Most of us will balk. And that's not the girl from Massachusetts.
Well,
So I can interview you like everybody else, but that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to find out how you got you, because I want that piece. And I want those that are listening to understand that if they're going to do this gig, everybody, if you love a cop and you're a shrink and you want to work with them, seems like great fun. Oh, it goes beyond that. Mm-hmm. You've got to be wired for this. Mm-hmm. So if you can share kind of how you ended up wired to understand, because I know you, like myself, you can sit in a room and you can feel a cop. They don't have to say a word, but you get how they feel. And that's what you work off of. The words come from their feelings, not yours. Mm-hmm. And take me back to Beverly, growing up, because you grew up in a tough area.
Well, that's an interesting story. You see, it's all about metaphors. I actually was born homeless. And for the first 7 years of my life, since you asked, I was homeless. Myself and 4 siblings. In and around Fall River, and then at 7, we were put in an orphanage in Fall River, Massachusetts, and it was an interesting place. 126 children, none of whom were orphans at all, and so it was difficult coming up that way. It was all about survival. If you've ever read Lord of the Flies, perhaps you can understand. So what we learned is that you find your place in the pecking order and you keep that place, and you pick a fight with the biggest kid in the orphanage, no matter how small you are, and then you just persevere, and you take every day and you embrace it, and you embrace it with gratitude. So that's how I'm wired. And plucky as I am, I survived.
So before you scooch along from that,
Oh boy.
there's four of you,
Actually, five.
5 siblings.
Mm-hmm.
So the oldest sibling then was how old? Did either one of your parents, were they homeless with you, or was it just you kids?
My mother was homeless with us, and my father was married to someone else. And we were minorities, biracial, if you would, and Portuguese, Hispanic, and they weren't married. And in those days, if you weren't married and you had children, you were probably homeless or you gave the children up. So she kept us for 7 years, and we moved from one abandoned store to another, or an abandoned shack that didn't have indoor plumbing or outdoor plumbing. So you sort of get a little tough that way. I never really even realized we were homeless until about 5 years ago. I said, wait a minute, we were really homeless. Somebody finally gave me the words. We were homeless before we were in the orphanage. Yeah.
Did the 5 of you stay together, and did your mom go into the orphanage? Your mom couldn't have gone into the orphanage.
No, my mother left us there. And my father did come to visit us once a week. And that was our lifeline to the outside world. So he came to visit us. The littlest one did not grow up in the orphanage. He was too little. So my father's parents took care of him. But the other 4, we were there at the orphanage. Yeah.
Did you guys get adopted?
No. We stayed there until it was run by a religious order. And when it was time, the religious order applied to the state of Massachusetts for funding. So the state said, well, who have you got in that orphanage? Who are those 126 children? And so they went through child by child, and anyone who had parents, they said, wait a minute, these children have parents. So we left. My mother took us and had us stay with an aunt, and then there was life after that. But I was old enough so that I left home.
What's everybody doing today? Are you close with everybody?
I'm close with everyone. Yes, my older brother, unfortunately, I'm the second oldest. My older brother is deceased from cancer. My sister was a nurse and got a master's in business, and she's retired now. I have another brother who's a letter carrier, like my father was. He delivered more than the mail, obviously. And my younger brother had a very successful career in telecommunications. So we're all very close.
And you all made it, so the new catchword and funding is resiliency.
Yes.
So they feel that if we could just make cops resilient, then they wouldn't kill themselves. So here's the profile of a cop, and I don't think that you're going to say differently. Somebody who's grown up in crisis, does well in crisis, doesn't know how to live without crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who has issues with a father figure or significant loss early in life, history of abuse, emotional, physical, sexual, or neglect. Makes for a great cop, difficult home life. But resilient motherfuckers,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to meet a more resilient population.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So see, it was a match made in heaven.
Oh,
I love resilience. I love studying resilience. And yeah.
yes. You can sit in that room with them and you can feel them.
Totally.
You are them.
Pretty
You
much.
grab that child. You grab the fear. You grab that uncertainty. And you can sit without the armor on.
Mm-hmm.
They can sit all armored up.
Mm-hmm.
But you penetrate that immediately.
Just be you. That's all. Find a metaphor in your own life and just be you. Just be real, be open. That's it. It's so simple.
Yes. And yet people screw it up all the time.
You know, it's interesting because when you consider how resilient police officers are, it boggles my mind. I mean, I could never do it. I could never do that profession. But really and truly, these are the real American heroes. It's not the basketball players, sorry folks, and it's not the football players, and it's not the actors and actresses. It's the people who go out every single day and will lay down their life for you, and you don't even know their name.
Yeah.
Right? And maybe wouldn't care if you did know their name. I don't know. But those are the real American heroes. And how can you not love? This has been like the blessing of my life. This is my passion. I mean, for the first 6 years, I did it for free. It's much better getting paid for it. Trust me. But this is a passion. It's not like work. You just do it. And whether it's politicians or city governments, whether they get it or they don't get it, that's not my job. My job is just to be in my little lane and do what I do. I'm a recluse. I never get out. I love being in my office and just working. Every single one of my clients, every single one of my officers has my cell phone, and I say, I'm giving it to you because you better use it. And they know it because Dr. Mom will get them.
Totally get it. Because you and I have said, I mean, it is for two women that have not practiced together.
Right.
It is, but I do believe that if you're going to do this right, that there's more than threads that have to be similar. I mean, the weaving of a world must be there. The threads we might have picked are different, but boy, that net has got to be very similar.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, and it was a magical period in time because I was volunteering my services. Let me tell you, I paid my dues, Stephanie. When I was volunteering and an officer was involved in a shooting, there wasn't, back in 1982, 1983, therapists and police officers, that was sort of like oil and water. We were regarded as very liberal, bleeding hearts, what have you, touchy-feely, and they'd sometimes make me wait outside of homicide on that hard wooden bench. I paid my dues. I'd go to sleep. They'd make me wait, and then, and then finally they let me in to talk to the police officer. It's been a long road since then, because what we had was a police chief and Maurice T. Turner, and the head of the union, Gary Hankins, and his wife was also a police officer, Janet, and she and I worked together. And it was the greatest fun. And I had no idea of what they were doing. And she said, we're going to negotiate this into a contract. We're going to make this a program. And they were negotiating the contract. And they said, well, we've got an employee assistance program. We've got 5 full-time therapists. So Janet and Gary said, well, let's look at your statistics. And in 6 months of working part-time, because I had a full-time job, in 6 months of volunteering, just me, I saw more police officers in 6 months than the 5 had seen in the whole year previous, because the officers didn't trust it. It was an in-house program, and they didn't trust that their personal business wasn't going to be on the street. And that's nothing against the therapists. They were fine therapists, but police officers are skeptical. They think about the things that they see and they witness and they experience, and so the way that it turned out, sure enough, the chief looked at that and said, well, that's pretty compelling. And so you have the union and the police chief who get together, and there's this joint union management program, and it's a freestanding program. I don't really work for anyone but the officers. That's who I work for. This is my practice, but this is the official program for the Metropolitan Police Department. I always say, we'll go to a fish fry if you ask us. We'll go anywhere. But we are the clinicians. We're making the decisions. And we have had tremendous police chiefs who have respected the program, utilized the program. we see the same percentage of police officials as we do rank and file. Partly because I'm grandma and I taught everybody once they got into the academy.
But that's so true. So I see that myself. So I now see a chief from one of the departments who I had 24 years ago. But that's just it, is that when they end up needing help and they go to, oh, it's just Beverly, or they go to, oh, it's just Steph, there's this comfort. So what's one of the things that we know? We know that if we can get into the police academies when they are going through, and we don't give them some soft shoe dance of bullshit,
Right.
that they will remember us. I had a guy that called me about 6 months ago. He had saved my card from 17 years ago. Who does that? But, and it's not, oh, that's great. It's just, if you impact somebody and then you have longevity, and you're right, if you worked for the department and then you've got to play departmental politics, chances are you're not going to be there 17 years later, 32 years later.
But how about 2 months?
Right.
I have a problem with authority.
So that is what we know begins that reducing of stigma. So I had gone to speak to brass with one department. They had called me. They were concerned about their officers. So I go into the department. There are five brass that are there. 3 of them are my patients. And I say to the brass, I said, you are worried about your officers. How many of you, just out of curiosity, have ever been in therapy? Fucking crickets. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, here's the deal. I'm doing this pro bono. I'm not wasting my goddamn time if y'all are going to sit there and lie. So scooched along. When I went into my car, when I tell you my phone was blowing up, I'm like, don't you dare. Don't you dare. You can't out yourself. That is the problem. The stigma exists. If you cannot say it is normal to talk to somebody and not normal to see what it is that you do, we are going to continue to perpetuate the suicide rates, the stigma, all of it.
And you know what, Stephanie? And that is what the magic is about this program, because from day one, there was a buy-in, number one. Number two, what we did early on in 1990 was, when an officer was involved in a critical incident, we have a general order, 201.28, that any officer involved in a critical incident must attend 6 critical incident debriefings. Now, what's magical about 6? This is me. Okay. What's magical about 6? Go back, Chief Isaac Fullwood, a giant of a man, a wonderful man. I was thinking, okay, maybe I'm not going to get what I really want. What I really want is 3 sessions. So I'll ask for 6. Little did I know, Chief Fullwood said, okay, we'll have 6 critical incident debriefings. So when you don't make it optional, when you say this is what you're going to do, then because if you say to a police officer, are you okay? Oh yeah, they're okay. So we don't do that. We say, okay, so I'm here. This is part of the general order. They remember me from the academy. And we are so deeply embedded in the culture that even before communications pages me out, I have shop stewards calling my cell phone. I have clients calling my cell phone. We're on a shooting. We're over here, wherever we are. And that's the call to come on out. So that, especially, we're so concerned about confidentiality and privacy. It's not uncommon for me to go into headquarters and an officer yelling out, hey, Doc, I can't make my appointment this week, but I'll holler at you. Okay. And I'm going, And they do. It's like
Right.
the mentality right now is where's EAP? Are they here yet? Hurry up and get them out. It's not, oh, there's EAP. It's
I want to just kind of stop on that, because that's huge. So we've got a listener that's asking about EAPs, and he says that they focus on the employee part, but they have trouble using it. And I assume that part of that has to do with it being trusted. Your EAP is unusual, Beverly.
yeah.
So I'm actually reading what he's saying, because what happens is, it says that's what he tells his fellow officers when he deals with them, that he's been there several times and it's okay, but they have to work on not staying there. So what happens when the EAPs aren't doing what they need to do? How can you vet an EAP? Because most of the time, the employee assistance programs are connected to the departments. You hear over and over again that they are not trusted, that the stuff goes back. How the hell do we send our officers into potentially the lion's den? How the hell do I, as a clinician, help guide an officer? I know for me, I've said to them, ask them who has privilege, ask them what records they keep.
Right.
You know,
And who owns the records?
who owns them, where this information goes back to. As scary and as shitty as this is, but if you really want to put them on notice, ask them for their damn license number. Because there's nothing that will perk somebody's ass until they realize whether they work for the Samuels Police Department or God's police department, that no matter who they're working for, their license is on the line.
You know, I think that we already have the vetting going on, and it's been several years since I checked with OPM for the utilization rate of EAPs among law enforcement. But the last time I checked, the utilization rate was between 1% and 3%. That's not good. I mean, my husband retired from the FBI. He said he wouldn't, it's just not something he would do. He wouldn't go to an employee assistance program in-house. And that's not to take away from the EAP. It's just a kind of a testimonial to the fact that you really have to win over a police officer, a law enforcement officer. They don't trust the system. They just don't. They know that there are politics, but there are politics everywhere. I think that it's less about therapists who aren't well-meaning and more about therapists who really, you have to know the mindset of a law enforcement officer. This law enforcement officer is not paranoid, he's hypervigilant. And why is he hypervigilant? Because police officers aren't called to people's barbecues. They're called out to bear witness to death, murder, assault, baby deaths, shootings.
And if they're going to a barbecue, it's because somebody's on fire.
That's right.
Shot.
That's right.
Absolutely. You know, I had listened to the podcast, or Answers the Call, that you had been on for Genesis House, and I loved what their definition of fine. Fine was fucked up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional.
Right.
That is the definition of a cop, that they are fine.
You know, and probably the cornerstone of that, in terms of the occupation, is the absolute isolation. You think about it. For 10 hours a day, now in DC, our officers, especially since COVID and the demonstrations, without complaining, they're working through their days off. They're working 18 hours. What they see, they don't go home and give all the gory little details. They leave it at the job. They do. They think that they do, because they don't come home and talk about it. But how isolating is that? to experience it, because the people at home don't know that death has an atmosphere, it has a sight, it has a sound, it has a smell. They don't know that at home, you see? And that's very isolating, because ultimately law enforcement officers really see their job. You have to have someone said this, and I'm going to steal it from them. You have to have a servant's heart to be a law enforcement officer.
I love that. Yeah.
And it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. They don't complain, and they just get out there and do the job. And
I've been interviewed a whole bunch of times to talking about COVID with Copline, with the hotline, to see whether or not, our call volumes went up and stuff, and we didn't after COVID, but we sure as hell did after George Floyd. And here's what I always say: when officers took the job, they knew that they were going to be fighting the invisible enemy. They just never believed that they would ever become the enemy.
right.
They were not prepared for that.
Yeah.
And not only, so you talk about a perfect storm, I don't think the public realizes. So you just described that isolating factor,
Mhm.
and that they can't come home, particularly with the riots and what's going on, because they don't want to worry their spouses.
Right.
And if they have time off, there's a good possibility they're doing Zoom school with their kids.
True.
So this is truly unprecedented.
Mhm.
People don't realize that they
Mhm.
still have the same responsibilities as we have as parents,
Mhm.
with a spouse that's at home trying to figure out how the hell do we get them on the computer to do school, and how are we navigating this new world, that
Right.
that that their days off that are truly treasured to try and unwind are as stressful, if not more so now,
Mhm.
with COVID.
And add one other layer, and that is you're on the street all day interacting with people. So you come home and you immediately strip down, put the clothing in the washing machine, take a shower, make sure that you are not going to be a super spreader to your family.
Right.
We have officers who have children who have autoimmune diseases. And so that's yet another demand on a resilient person, but it's still a demand. There's a lot of demands. It's my realtor sent me an email and said, Beverly, I'm just so disheartened. I'm watching these police officers protecting these people who they're protecting their right to gather and to demonstrate. And these people are treating them so horribly, and yet they're still protecting them. And that speaks to the professionalism of our police officers.
Yeah.
It goes unnoticed, you know?
One of the things, and I know that that we have a question. One of the things that Copline has been trying to do is to vet clinically, and you know this because I've asked you for the list of people, clinically competent and culturally competent therapists throughout the United States that treat cops. And one of the things that gets eliminated is those that do fitness for duties.
Right, right.
Because you can't play two sides. That
No,
is
you can't.
an issue. So when people have asked for resources, so one of the things that we do tell them is to go ahead and to call Copline, which is 1-800-COPLINE 267-5463, so that they can get a vetted, a list of therapists.
Yeah.
Because Joe Shit the Rag Man can't do this. They just get so I had a case where the person was involved in a shooting, workers' comp case. I'm hated by workers' comp. So they send the individual to a licensed therapist who deals with mentally ill patients, so bipolar, schizophrenic, or what have you. However, the officer that shot the individual, the person that he shot happened to be schizophrenic. So he now walks into an office, is immediately triggered by the last patient, and says to the therapist, do you treat police? And she said, no, but if this is your first shooting, then you and I can both do firsts together.
Wow. Whoa.
Where do you go with that?
Ah, yes. Practice in the area of your competency, don't you?
So, so when people are skeptical, I think part of it is because we send them to these people. Just because you're a therapist
Mhm.
doesn't mean that you can truly deal with this population.
Right. Right.
And we've talked about first responder inpatient programs. Everybody and their uncle now has one. Well,
Mhm.
it doesn't mean that you're culturally competent, that you can have a inpatient. And I remember years ago when we were setting up at McLean, and you're like, I'm very particular on where I send them. And that was so important. And that, just like you, these places need to be tried and true.
Yes.
And I'm sure that you get the phone calls that I get, that, people are, come to Florida. Everybody wants me to go to Florida.
Right.
We'll pay for you to go to Florida. I don't need anybody to pay for me to do anything.
Right. Right.
And if you think I'm going to be owned for a Florida vacation,
Mm-mm.
that's not happening. And when
That's
they want to take me to lunch, I also pay for the meal, because certainly
right.
nobody's owning me for lunch.
You and me.
You get the referrals just like I do. I earned it because they believe that I'm the right fit.
Right.
And the integrity of therapists, because what you just said, I want to go back to it about police. They really ask for very little from us.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't expect a whole lot, but it is our job to give them everything that we have.
Mm-hmm.
Just like when we call 911 at 2:18 in the morning, whether
Mm-hmm.
we paid our taxes or we haven't, they're showing up.
Mm-hmm.
And whether we have been protesting all day long and throwing urine at them, they're still showing up to take care of us and our
Right.
loved ones. We
Right.
owe them 110%.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we need to figure out who the we are, so
Mm-hmm.
that when they finally reach out, they get the right person. Because as you know, most of the time, there's never a second try.
Right. Right. And you know what? The way that I describe it is, we work with the walking wounded and the worried well. That's our population, the walking wounded and the worried well. And what a dream, really, to be working with such a resilient population. I mean, so it's not your normal neuroses,
Right,
you
right.
know.
They go south really quickly, but damn it, they come up north very quickly too.
They do, and but the thing is, Stephanie, and you know it, and I know it. We do a pretty good job of vetting our police officer candidates, right?
Yep, yep.
Law enforcement in this country does not do a very good job of taking care of our officers from the time they get into the academy to the time they retire. And one of the things that Chief Newsham said, and he's our chief, he said their mental health, their emotional health is just as important as their physical health. And he really has a buy-in to this program completely. And he really believes in that. He sincerely believes in it. And if we could get every police department that, look at it, our program costs $750,000. We have almost 4,000 police officers. If we save one police officer from maybe getting so burned out that he's overly aggressive, how do you even put a price tag on that? How do you put a price tag on a life? You can't measure what hasn't happened. You can't measure suicides that haven't happened. But I always say, and I say this to my team, practice as though her life, his life, and your life depend on it. And if we're going to make a mistake, we're going to make a mistake on the safe side. And we're always going to call. If you call today, you're going to get a call back today. If I say to you, I'm going to call you tomorrow just to check on you, if you're talking to a police officer, you'd better call that next day. I say, you don't even have to talk to me. It's not about me. Just put your answering machine on. But they know, and they trust us, that if we say we're going to do something, we do it, that we are there for them.
They're not used to the consistency. They're not used to people keeping their word. They are lied to. Not only are they lied to
Mm-hmm.
by looking in their eye, they're lied to swearing to God, swearing on their mother's life, their children's life, blah,
Yeah.
blah, 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 and they still are lying.
Right.
And then they don't understand. So that hypervigilance is
Mm-hmm.
paranoia based in reality. Their reality is so different
Mm-hmm.
than the rest of the world. So, I always talk about when my kids were younger, we'd go to the mall, live in a nice area in Jersey, and I would tell the kids when we're at the mall, if something happens, we're going to go behind this pole, then you're going to wait for mommy, or you're going to go into this store. And then I'd watch to see who was wearing a shirt that was hanging over their waistband. I'd watch how they're swinging their arms.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to your average Jewish woman walking around the Freehold Mall, I'm a lunatic. Your average cop, it makes perfect sense.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
yeah, my reality is changed because of them.
Yes.
The other part of that sentence is you can't not know what you know. So if something goes wrong, they cannot say, I didn't know better.
Right.
And neither can you anymore, and
Right.
neither can I.
Right.
Because we've been listening for too many years
Mhm.
to know differently.
That's right. We're isolated too. And that's okay. You know, in some ways we're sadder but wiser, but I've loved and enjoyed every moment and continue, and we'll continue who knows how long.
It's not a job. Like my
No.
husband would say to me, he's like, I will be excited when Monday rolls around. And I'm like, oh my God, look who's coming in today. Blah, blah, blah. It's and people always say to me, because my notes are abominable, because they're abominable,
Mhm.
and handwriting is worse than the notes. And people say, well, don't you get confused? I'm like, do you have more than one friend?
That's
They're
right.
like, no. I'm like, you don't get your friends' spouses mixed up with your other friends' spouses or the name of their kids or
Mhm.
whatever. I'm like, I'm just blessed. I have
Oh,
like 90 friends that I get to see in a week.
oh my goodness. It's so true. It's
Right?
yes.
And then you worry about them in between. And I find
Mhm.
myself, I've got somebody whose son's in the hospital for whatever. Yeah, I just throw it. Texting's amazing. You're throwing the text that
Yes.
just says, just checking in.
Yes.
And the other part, which is part of that critical incident piece, when you have, when you talk about you better call them or what have you, one
Mhm.
of the factors that law enforcement struggles with is when somebody's out on injury and people call them and that officer doesn't respond, that a lot of times we re-victimize the victim. It's like they didn't call me back, they didn't text, fuck them, blah
Mhm.
blah blah. And they don't understand
Right.
that they're not doing well. They don't know what to say. They're inundated, they're overwhelmed.
Mhm.
So I always encourage people to say, I'm just checking up, because this is what I do. I'm just checking up to let you know that I'm thinking of you. Do not feel like you have to text me back.
Right. 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 It's not about me. You.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just it. There's no room for narcissism here.
No. No. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, in your years, what are you proudest of?
I'm proudest of the team that I have here in the office. My first team we're here for 22 years, and Lloyd Jackson, who's been with me since 1990, he's still with us. I just made him stay home because he's 80 years old, and I don't want him to get COVID. But he's still on our team. I am proudest of the fact that this is a team, and really this program is the result of a team approach by the union, a team approach by management, a joint union management venture where both the union and the management is all in. They respect the value of the program. And I mean, how could you ask for more than that? I mean, I'm just sort of like, maybe I'm the conductor, maybe I'm that, but I'm a therapist at heart, and that's what I love doing, you know. But that's what I'm proudest of, is the marvelous clinicians, Anastasia Pytel, Dr. Pytel, wonderful, Dr. Alex Rodriguez, Lloyd Jackson, Janice Evans, Dr. Martin, Dr. Green. Now we're growing police psychologists over here like a greenhouse. And oh yeah, and I won't hire anybody that doesn't have you have to have passion. And my team, they are all in.
So, you know, one of the requirements I feel that needs to be done is that clinicians need to do ride-alongs.
Oh, absolutely.
That in order to understand, this is the all about me thing. So I realize that there's no better free sightseeing than doing ride-alongs when you land in a new location.
Oh yes.
All over this. So and they'll always know. I mean, it'll be shit food, but it's good shit food. So you'll always get
Right.
like where you should be eating, how you can get a discount where you're eating.
Right.
But you know, in all seriousness, there is a true benefit from really being able to do the ride-alongs, to being able to understand. So when I moved out to Jersey, so we've got 26 different towns here in just Monmouth County.
Wow.
So we've got like these little podunk town, Avon by the Sea. You know, population in the wintertime is a couple thousand, and in the summer goes to tens of thousands.
Wow.
But because they typically grew up there, every call is typically an emotionally charged call because it's not John or Jane Doe. So everybody makes fun of, oh, it's Mayberry, nothing happens there. They don't get it.
Yeah.
So for me, being able to really educate, you know, because everybody was like, oh, you did ride-alongs with LAPD, with the sheriff's department. They're awesome. They were wonderful. It's the 80s. It was gangs. It was, you know, all the adrenaline, absolutely fun. But some of the most heart-wrenching stuff came from my little small towns here, where it's just devastating to listen to the little boy who they couldn't save, who, you know, who was their aunt's, you know, child. It's just so, and it's all about not taking the convenient shift for 30 minutes. It's about riding the full shift.
Oh, sure.
Because for those first 4 hours or 6 hours, you know, they think that you've been planted there. The chief put you there, IA put you there, hence the paranoia.
Right.
And then comes the hypervigilance when they realize this bitch ain't leaving. And her mouth is horrendous. So after
I don't like that.
Yeah, well, they better. After 4 to 6 hours, somehow or another, I go from being whomever to like wearing a collar every single confession that they could make. Any critical incident, that is the gift.
Yes.
Because once they trust you, but damn it, you've got to earn that trust.
You do.
And as you said, you know, 8 years or 6 years pro bono. So here I still take on pro bono cases when it comes to workers' comp, and they're some of the most horrific stuff. Comp hates me. They will not pay. I can't turn an officer down.
No.
That's why I do this. That's why you do what you do. And it's really difficult. And I'll ask you, how do you navigate the therapists that you know are in it for the money? That they treat the cops. They have typically good insurance.
Right.
And yet there's no pro bono. They overcharge. It's so difficult. It's so difficult because it's all about integrity.
Right. I've never charged a cop because I don't have to, because I have this program, but I, you know, I volunteer. I think it's so important that a portion of what you do, you volunteer. because, I really trust the universe. I never meant to have my own practice, and I hate the administrative part. I'm just a therapist, but this was what the universe had to give me. So, but I volunteer whenever I can, whenever the moment presents itself. And we're so fortunate to have the chiefs of police that we've had, because when Chief Ramsey was here, Chief Lanier, Chief Newsham, they're sharing. I mean, we all have the same mentality. What you have to give, because you can't keep it. You got to spread it. You've got to give it. And so if there's a line of duty death and I'm available, I'm going to go down to Virginia. I'm going to go wherever, because we have to we have to be there for each other. These are the real American heroes. These are the people who put their lives on the line, and they're valuable. And so we've been given the gift of their trust. And so you run with it. And there's no greater joy than being able to do that.
Yeah. So true. And true volunteerism is so different. I really saw what that spirit is when I did Copline.
Right.
These men and women, and we've got retired Metropolitan. Yes, indeed. I will tell you afterwards, but yes. Yep. Love him. Yep. As a matter of fact, you and I would be chatting about actually having about holding one of the trainings in DC. But just hear these men and women that have done amazing careers all over the country and Canada that still want to give back and give back to the population that they truly love. And that they miss. It's their own. It's not the politics. It's not the streets. It's their own. And what that means. And I don't think that it's a surprise that all these chiefs, Beverly, support the mental health. It is you that has created the environment that has made it easy for them to understand the importance of this. You don't walk in as Dr. Anderson. You walk in as Beverly. You walk in as a young girl that you so lovingly shared with us, that was humble, who survived herself and pulled herself up to where you are today, that you can talk to any chief from that place that says, I get it, chief. I get the pain that they have, that isolation, the helplessness, the hurt. And you don't have to say anything about why you get it, but that's what it is. That was your gift, that every one of these chiefs, that you have been part of their lives, knew that they had to do this for their officers, because they had this woman named Dr. Beverly Anderson that could create something that none of us, Beverly, none of us have ever created but you.
It was a moment in time. It was the stars aligned. I was just a part of this magical moment. And I seized it, and I embraced it, and I ran with it. And my staff, it was really a team. It takes a village. It was great chiefs. It was great union people. Everybody had the same agenda. We know the need is there. We believe in it. Chief Newsham believes in it. Chief Lanier believed in it. Chief Ramsey, they believed in it. They said, okay, we've got this.
But you were able to explain to them why they needed it.
They saw it in action, and they actually ordered people. We do have people ordered to see us, and they can be ordered, just nobody can find out what happens here. And hopefully, we do a good job, and that's why we'll have high-ranking officials who come in, and I say, well, I have an office full of people. Do you want to stay for a moment? No, I don't want to stay for a moment. Let me see who's out there. Hey, how are you? What's going on? It's like, this is our normal on MPD. over 32 years, we are so deeply ingrained in the culture that our normal is high-ranking officials sitting down out in the waiting room saying, hey, how are you doing? Where are you now? Just great people. So, it's not me. It's just, I'm just a very small part. Great people who work for me and just a wonderful police department. This is, although we're the nation's capital, we're kind of like a small town. And that's really nice because we're in a small area. So we're kind of condensed. I can get to a shooting. Wow. I can get to a shooting in 10 minutes. And the attorneys and I kind of have a little, when Mr. 80s was alive, he and I had a contest going, who could get to the shooting first? But he used to wear his pajamas. I don't go on a shooting scene with my pajamas on. Oh, he was something else.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah. But he was very devoted to the officers. And he'd call me on his way over, where are you? Great people.
A great leader, Beverly. A great leader. Don't ever downplay the importance of a leader. And that's what we hope for with our law enforcement, with those that become chiefs, that they lead.
Yes.
That they lead by example.
Right.
I had briefly mentioned that you had fought when you had a subpoena.
I sure did.
About records that you refused to give them, and you showed up in court. Go ahead.
Yes, and there's a very nice judge. She wanted the record, and I told her that she couldn't have the record, and I wasn't going to acknowledge even whether I had seen the officer or not. And I gave her the Supreme Court ruling, Jaffe v. Redmond, issued in June of 1996. And she said, she ordered me to come back to her courtroom with the record the following day and my attorney, and that incarceration was in the picture for me. So I went home. I told my children, they were still all home at the time. I had to see there was some value in it. I think that the prison suit was orange, and I am a fall. Okay, I'm autumn colors. So that would be the prison garb. But I said, can I bring my books? I didn't want to go, but it wasn't a hard decision to make. It just wasn't a hard decision. It was no decision. It wasn't going to happen. And I said to her, I will close the doors to my practice before I ever give you a record. I will close the door. If the Supreme Court saw the value of the client-therapist relationship and thought that it was sacred enough to protect, then she should as well. And I guess she did, because she got word to me that I did not have to appear before the court. And so, but it was a great PR, because all those detectives and police officers are in the court, and I'm saying, nuh-uh, not turning it over.
That's leading. That's leading by example. That's the only thing you've known how to do. That's the resiliency. That's the survival. That's answering to yourself, a belief, a higher power, whatever it is. But that integrity is unwavering. And that is what any cop.
That's a good point that you make, because what I'm hearing when you say that is and what we call an internal locus of control, that you are governed by your moral compass, to be governed by what you know is right, and to do what is right. And police officers have that. They have a deep respect for humanity. You have to have a deep respect for humanity, a sense of responsibility. Think about it, responsibility for people. They're so good at taking care of everybody else, not so good about taking care of themselves, just being exposed to stress and trauma. And we know, science tells us, it's cumulative. Your body keeps the score. To be witnessing traumatic events, witnessing sad things. Our department is so terrific, and we've done such a great job of training our managers. When we have a baby death, they're on the phone, and that officer is meeting with us within the hour. And, that's a buy-in by the department. They really believe in it. The fact that they have to deal with unpredictability and chaos, they have to make order out of chaos. And they do it. How many times have you ever witnessed an accident, a car accident, and a police officer is running over, screaming, yelling? Everybody else is screaming and yelling. What restraint these officers have. Their executive functioning is unbelievable. This is just, when I say the real American heroes, I'm not kidding. Confronting the death threat, danger, all of that.
Yeah. And asking nothing.
Asking nothing.
Just let me go home tonight.
Yes.
That's it. Just let me go back to my family.
Yeah.
So I could talk for hours. Is there anything that I haven't covered that you want me to cover tonight before we end the show?
What I'd love for you to do is incorporate the brain physiology into the training, because that is the one thing we're doing this professional development training, that the officers love to understand. What does that mean? The hypervigilance, what's hyperarousal? To be able to explain to them so that they can understand what's going on with their brains. Why does their body take over? If every police officer got this kind of training and had a program that costs less than $1 million, $750,000, there's just, you would save so many lives, so many souls, so many people emotionally, but also these officers could retire and thrive, not just survive,
right?
But thrive and be at peace, as they so well deserve. So we just got to keep fighting the good fight, Stephanie.
Yes, and actually that is something that I want to cover, is the brain physiology. So what I'd like to have you back on to really cover what happens to the brain with trauma, because that's something that I agree that officers need to understand, because they don't understand the adrenaline reaction,
Right.
and what happens when kind of the adrenaline, when their car is in neutral and the pedal's stuck to the ground and they are just going and they don't know
Absolutely.
how to deal with it.
Right.
So if you would honor me to have you back on, I would love to deal with just the critical incidents part and really what the brain does. Because so often, even if it's just a call that's a man with a gun call or an unresponsive child, you go from 0 to 100.
Mhm.
Even if you get there, the baby's fine. There's no firearm or weapon.
Mhm.
Your body has still gone
Right.
into
Exactly.
that. So I absolutely want to discuss that.
Right. That and debriefing. We need to discuss debriefing and why it's so important, because it is connected to the brain physiology.
And
Using language.
who does the debriefings and at what point in time? Those are the also.
You want that answer now? You don't want that answer now, right?
And the models that should be used for the debriefing, because we got lots of stuff going on with that.
Yes.
Yeah, we're gonna when we go private, we're gonna set another date, because we need.
Okay.
All right. So thank you for your life. Thank you for being resilient. Thank you for following a path that was a calling. And thank you for never, ever, ever giving up.
Never.
Ever.
Thank you, Stephanie.
You're very welcome. So next week, I'm going to have Dennis Cronin, who's a retired captain from the Old Bridge Police Department, who wrote a book called Shadows on the Wall. And we're going to be discussing the souls behind those shadows that he actually wrote about. So been involved in a bunch of critical incidents and 9/11, and took him about 30 years to go into therapy, but kind of what he's learned and the experience that he's had. So looking forward to that. And in the meantime, please tell everybody about StephTherapy911 with Stephanie Samuels. We're really hoping to be able to make an impact on a much larger basis with the law enforcement community and civilians that are trying to understand kind of what goes on with law enforcement.